The Secrets of the Sea. I rose and leaned on my elbows before the panes, and watched. In a full electric light, an enormous black mass, quite immovable, was suspended in the midst of the waters. I watched it attentively, seeking to find out the nature of this gigantic cetacean. But a sudden thought crossed my mind. "A vessel," I said, half aloud. "Yes," replied the Canadian. "A disabled ship that has sunk perpendicularly." Mackerel bonitos, Ned Land was right. We were close to a vessel of which the tattered shrouds still hung from their chains. The keel seemed to be in good order, and it has been wrecked at most some few hours. 3 stumps of masts, broken off about 2 feet above the bridge, showed that the vessel had to sacrifice its masts. This skeleton of what it had once been was a sad spectacle as it lay lost under the waves, but sadder still was the sight of the bridge where some corpses bound with ropes were lying. "And I can visit the celebrated islands where the Boussole and the Astrolabe struck?" "If you like, Professor." "When shall we be there?" "We are there now." Followed by Captain Nemo, I went up on the platform and greedily scanned the horizon. To the northeast, 2 volcanic islands emerged of unequal size, surrounded by a coral reef that measured 40 miles in circumference. We were close to Vanikoro, really the one to which Dumont d'Urville gave the name of Île de la Recherche, and exactly facing the little harbour of Vannon, situated in 16 degrees 4 minutes south latitude and 164 degrees 32 minutes east longitude. The earth seemed covered with verdure from the shore to the summits in the interior, that were crowned by Mount Kapogo, 476 feet high. The Nautilus, having passed the outer belt of rocks by a narrow strait, found itself among breakers, where the sea was from 30 to 40 fathoms deep. Under the verdant shade of some mangroves, I perceived some savages who appeared greatly surprised at our approach. In the long black body, moving between wind and water, did they not see some formidable cetacean that they regarded with suspicion? Just then, Captain Nemo asked me what I knew about the wreck of La Pérouse. "Only what everyone knows, Captain," I replied. "And could you tell me what everyone knows about it?" he inquired ironically. "Easily." I related to him all that the last works of Dumont d'Urville had made known, works from which the following is a brief account. La Pérouse and his second, Captain de L'Ongle, were sent by Louis XVI in 1785 on a voyage of circumnavigation. They embarked in the corvettes the Boussole and the Astrolabe, neither of which were again heard of. In 1791, the French government, justly uneasy as to the fate of these 2 sloops, manned 2 large merchantmen, the Recherche and the Espérance, which left Brest the 28th of September under the command of Bruni d'Entrecasteaux. 2 months after, they learned from Bowen, commander of the Albemarle, that the debris of shipwrecked vessels had been seen on the coasts of New Georgia, But D'Entrecasteaux, ignoring this communication, rather uncertain besides, directed his course toward the Admiralty Isles, mentioned in a report of Captain Hunter's as being the place where La Pérouse was wrecked. They sought in vain. The Espérance and the Recherche passed before Vanikoro without stopping there, and in fact, this voyage was most disastrous, as it cost D'Entrecasteaux his life, and those of 2 of his lieutenants, beside several of his crew. Captain Dillon, a shrewd old Pacific sailor, was the first to find unmistakable traces of the wrecks. On the 15th of May, 1824, his vessel, the St. Patrick, passed close to Tikopia, one of the New Hebrides. There, a Lascar came alongside in a canoe, sold him the handle of a sword in silver that bore the print of characters engraved on the hilt. The Lascar pretended that 6 years before, during the stay at Vanikoro, he had seen 2 Europeans that belonged to some vessels that had run aground on the reefs some years ago. Dillon guessed that he meant La Pérouse, whose disappearance had troubled the whole world. He tried to get on to Vanikoro, where, according to the Lascar, he would find numerous debris of the wreck, but winds and tide prevented him. Dillon returned to Calcutta. There he interested the Asiatic Society and the Indian Company in his discovery. A vessel to which was given the name of the Recherche was put at his disposal, and he set out January 23, 1827, accompanied by a French agent. The Recherche, after touching at several points in the Pacific, cast anchor before Vanikoro July the 7th, 1827, in this same harbor of Vannes, where the Nautilus was at this time. There it collected numerous relics of the wreck: iron utensils, anchors, pulleys, strops, swivel guns, and 18-pound shot, fragments of astronomical instruments, a piece of crown work, and a bronze clock bearing this inscription: Bazin m'a fait. The mark of the foundry of the arsenal at Brest about 1785. There could be no further doubt. Dillon, having made all inquiries, stayed in the unlucky place till October. Then he quitted Vanikoro and directed his course towards New Zealand, put into Calcutta April the 7th, 1828, and returned to France, where he was warmly welcomed by Charles X. But at the same time, without knowing Dillon's movements, Dumont d'Urville had already set out to find the scene of the wreck. He had learned from a whaler that same medals and the cross of St. Louis had been found in the hands of some savages of Louisiade and New Caledonia. He had then sailed, and 2 months after Dillon had left Vanikoro, he put into Hobart Town. There he learned the results of Dillon's inquiries and found that a certain James Hobbs, second lieutenant of the Union of Calcutta, after landing on an island situated 8 degrees 18 minutes south latitude and 156 degrees 30 minutes east longitude, had seen some iron bars and red stuffs used by the natives of these parts. Dumont d'Urville, much perplexed and not knowing how to credit the reports of low-class journals, decided to follow Dillon's track. On the 10th of February, 1828, the Astrolabe appeared off Tikopia and took as guide and interpreter a deserter found on the island. Made his way to Vanikoro, sighted it on the 12th, lay among the reefs until the 14th, and not until the 20th did he cast anchor within the barrier in the harbour of Vannon. On the 23rd, several officers went round the island and brought back some unimportant trifles. The natives, adopting a system of denial and evasions, refused to take them to the unlucky place. This ambiguous conduct led them to believe that the natives had ill-treated the castaways, and indeed, they seemed to fear that Dumont d'Urville had come to avenge La Pérouse and his unfortunate crew. However, on the 26th, appeased by some presents and understanding they had no reprisals to fear, they led M. Jacquirot to the scene of the wreck. There, in 3 or 4 fathoms of water between the reefs of Parcou and Vanu, lay anchors, cannons, pigs of lead and iron embedded in the limy concretions. The large boat and the whaler belonging to the Astrolabe were sent to this place, and, not without some difficulty, the crews hauled up an anchor weighing 1,800 pounds, a brass gun, some pigs of iron, and 2 copper swivel guns. Dumont d'Urville, questioning the natives, learned too that La Pérouse, after losing both his vessels on the reefs of this island, had constructed a smaller boat only to be lost a second time. Where? No one knew. But the French government, fearing that Dumont d'Urville was not acquainted with Dillon's movements, had sent the sloop Bayonnaise, commanded by Léogoran de Tomelin, to Vanikoro. The Bayonnaise cast her anchor before Vanikoro some months after the departure of the Astrolabe. She found no new evidence, but stated that the savages had respected the monument to La Pérouse. That is the substance of what I told to Captain Nemo. So, he said, no one knows where the 3rd vessel perished that was constructed by the castaways of the island of Vanikoro? No one knows. Captain Nemo said nothing, but signed me to follow him into the large saloon. The Nautilus sank several yards below the waves, and the panels were opened. I hastened to the aperture, and under the crustaceans of coral covered with fungi, siphonules, alcyons, madrepores, through myriads of charming fish, girelles, glypsidri, pompherides, diacopes, and holocenters, I recognized certain debris that the drags had not been able to tear up. Iron stirrups, anchors, cannons, bullets, capstan fittings, the stem of a ship, all objects clearly proving the wreck of some vessel, and now carpeted with living flowers. While I was looking on this desolate scene, Captain Nemo said in a sad voice, "Commander La Pérouse set out on December the 7th, 1785, with his vessels, La Boussole and the Astrolabe. He first cast anchor at Botany Bay, visited the Friendly Isles, New Caledonia, then directed his course toward Santa Cruz and put into Namuka, one of the Hapai group. Then his vessel struck one of the unknown reefs of Vanikoro. The Boussole, which went first, ran aground on the southerly coast. The Astrolabe went to its help and ran aground too. The first vessel was destroyed almost immediately. The second, stranded under the wind, resisted some days. The natives made the castaways welcome. They installed themselves in the island and constructed a smaller boat with the debris of the 2 large ones. Some sailors stayed willingly at Vanikoro. The others, weak and ill, set out with La Pérouse. They directed their course toward the Solomon Islands and there perished, with everything, on the westerly coast of the chief island of the group, between Capes Deception and Satisfaction. How do you know that? By this, that I found on the spot where was the last wreck. Captain Nemo showed me a tin plate box stamped with the French arms and corroded by the salt water. He opened it, and I saw a bundle of papers, yellow but still readable. They were the instructions of the naval minister to Commander La Perouse, annotated in the margin in Louis XVI's handwriting. Ah, it is a fine death for a sailor, said Captain Nemo at last. A coral tomb makes a quiet grave, and I trust that I and my comrades will find no other.